It was a typical afternoon at the supermarket, the kind of ordinary day that blended in with countless others. The air hummed with the sound of overhead lights, the constant clatter of shopping carts being pushed down aisles, and the chatter of customers haggling over prices or discussing their plans for the evening. The supermarket, with its white-tiled floors and bright fluorescent lights, seemed to echo the usual rhythm of suburban life, a predictable buzz of activity that no one really paid much attention to anymore. Behind the cash register, Lily stood, her hands moving methodically as she scanned groceries. The young woman, in her mid-20s, had a noticeable baby bump, her pregnancy clearly reaching its later stages. Despite her rounded belly, she moved between the checkout lanes with practiced ease, her tired eyes betraying a struggle to keep up with the afternoon rush. She smiled as she greeted each customer, trying to maintain a cheerful facade, but her steps were slow and her breath a little heavier than usual. It was a hot day, and even the constant motion of ringing up items couldn't shake the feeling of discomfort that settled in her chest. Lily wasn't sure if it was just the weight of the baby or something else, but her body seemed to ache in ways she hadn't anticipated this late in the pregnancy. Still, she pushed through. She had to. Her shift wasn't over yet, and her determination to keep going, despite feeling a little off, was something she knew she couldn't let slide. As the hours ticked by, Lily's exhaustion became more and more evident. The sweat on her forehead had already begun to form tiny beads, which she quickly wiped away with the back of her hand, only to have them return a moment later. She moved slowly, the weight of her pregnant belly making each step feel heavier than the last. The constant motion of lifting heavy bags and scanning items was taking a toll on her already tired body. Every now and then, she winced as she adjusted her posture, trying to find a more comfortable position. Her thoughts drifted to her pregnancy. The constant reminder of her growing belly made her more aware of the physical strain she was under. She had been working through most of her pregnancy, determined not to let it stop her, but now, at this stage, it was harder. The aches in her back, the soreness in her legs, it felt like they were all amplified. She briefly wondered if she had been pushing herself too hard, but she quickly dismissed the thought. There was no time for self-pity. Her shift needed to be finished, and she needed the paycheck. The line of customers didn't seem to end. As the next shopper approached, Lily forced a smile, trying to mask her discomfort. A few customers glanced at her with faint concern, but no one made a big deal of it. To them, she was just another tired cashier doing her job, like so many others. "I hope you're doing okay," one of the older women said with a soft smile as Lily handed her change, though her words were more out of politeness than genuine concern. Lily nodded, trying to keep up appearances, but inside, she fought the urge to take a break, just a few minutes to sit down, to catch her breath. But she knew that wasn't possible. Not today. Lily's exhaustion had grown unbearable. Her forehead glistened with sweat as she wiped it away, her hand trembling slightly from the effort. The heavy bags of groceries she was scanning seemed to get heavier with every passing minute. She winced as she reached for another, the weight pulling at her tired muscles. The discomfort in her back and legs was relentless, but she tried to push it aside, focusing on the task at hand. Her thoughts wandered briefly to her pregnancy, to the baby growing inside her. She hadn't expected the late stages to be so physically demanding. It was one thing to work while pregnant, but today felt different, like her body was no longer willing to cooperate. Every step felt like it took more effort than it should, and a deep sense of exhaustion was settling in her bones. But there was no way she could take a break now. She couldn't afford to. As Lily scanned another set of groceries, she felt it, a sharp wave of dizziness that hit her out of nowhere. Her vision blurred, and everything around her started spinning. She tried to steady herself, but it was too late. Her knees buckled beneath her, and she collapsed to the cold tile floor with a soft thud. Time seemed to slow as Lily fell, her senses fading in and out. She could hear the distant voices of the customers around her, but they seemed muffled, as if coming from far away. The sound of her breath became erratic, and her mind swirled in a haze of confusion. The chaos erupted almost instantly. Customers gasped, some calling for help while others stood frozen, unsure of what to do. A few rushed to her side, their voices frantic and filled with concern. Meanwhile, others, more annoyed than alarmed, murmured under their breath about the disruption. The store manager, panic in his eyes, scrambled through the crowd, waving frantically for medical assistance. He tried to take control of the situation, but his own anxiety was evident as he barked orders at anyone who would listen. As the chaos of Lily's collapse spread through the supermarket, panic began to set in. The store, usually filled with the hum of everyday shoppers, now seemed to buzz with anxiety and confusion. Employees were shouting, customers were yelling for help, and the air felt thick with fear. In the midst of it all, a figure suddenly emerged, moving through the crowd with an air of calm that was immediately noticeable. Johnny Depp. It was impossible to ignore the iconic figure as he made his way through the sea of panic-stricken shoppers. The scene froze for a moment. Why was Johnny Depp in a suburban supermarket? Was this some kind of bizarre publicity stunt? Whispers rippled through the crowd as people began to realize who had just walked in. For a brief second, the madness shifted from concern for Lily to shock at the unexpected celebrity appearance. Johnny moved gracefully, as though he had stepped into the situation with quiet purpose, unnoticed until now. His casual presence stood in stark contrast to the frantic energy of the store. He wasn't rushing to make an entrance or trying to draw attention to himself. No flash of cameras, or the kind of dramatic gestures one might expect from a movie star. Instead, he moved calmly through the crowd, his eyes scanning the situation. Without hesitation, Johnny knelt next to Lily, his hands steady as he gently checked her pulse. There was no sign of panic in his demeanor, just a quiet, focused determination. His celebrity status didn't seem to affect his actions. He was simply there to help. The atmosphere, heavy with tension moments before, seemed to shift. Customers, still stunned by his unexpected appearance, began to fall silent, their frantic energy replaced by an uneasy calm. Johnny, sensing their confusion, spoke in a soft but confident voice. "It's going to be okay," he said, his words carrying an unusual weight that seemed to settle the crowd. "She'll be fine, just give her some space." It was an odd thing. The way his presence alone brought a sense of reassurance. People who had been on edge just moments before, now found themselves standing still, listening to him, as if his words held some kind of power. His calm demeanor, the absence of urgency in his actions, made the whole situation feel surreal, like something out of a movie. Johnny's presence, calm and composed amidst the chaos, seemed almost surreal. He leaned closer to Lily, his voice soft but steady. "You're going to be okay," he said, gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. His words, simple as they were, carried an almost magical calmness with them, as though they had the power to make the panic in the air dissipate. Lily's shallow breaths began to steady, and for the first time since her collapse, there was a flicker of hope. At first, it seemed like a mere coincidence that Johnny Depp was so composed in such a frantic situation. He was, after all, a celebrity. A man used to being in the spotlight, dealing with high-pressure moments. Perhaps his calm demeanor was just a product of his years in the limelight. But as Johnny continued to speak, something deeper began to surface. There was a warmth to his words, a familiarity that suggested he knew exactly how to handle moments like these, not just as a celebrity, but as someone who had faced real personal struggles. The way he spoke to Lily wasn't just to reassure her, it was as if he knew her pain, and how to help her through it. Around them, the store seemed to quiet down. The frantic chatter of the customers and the anxious shuffling of employees slowed. Even the store manager, who had been frantically running around trying to manage the situation, stopped in his tracks. He had heard the whispers too, the strange calm that seemed to settle over everyone when Johnny arrived. "Johnny's in town for a film shoot," the manager said, his voice trailing off, almost as if he was still processing the bizarre reality unfolding before him. "But how? Why is he?" Before he could finish, something changed in Lily's expression. She had started to stir, her eyes fluttering open. The confusion in her eyes was clear at first, but as her gaze landed on Johnny, a wave of recognition swept over her face. She blinked, her hand instinctively reaching out toward him. It wasn't the look of a starstruck fan. It was something far more personal. Lily's voice, barely above a whisper, cracked as she spoke. "Johnny." Her breath caught in her throat, as if the name itself held a weight she had carried for years. The store, already stunned by the unexpected presence of the actor, now fell into a deeper silence. This wasn't just a random celebrity moment. There was something else, something more than just the chance encounter of an actor and a shopper. Lily knew him. This wasn't some fleeting recognition. Lily knew him. This wasn't some fleeting recognition. This was different. Lily's head was foggy as she slowly regained consciousness, her surroundings still distant and unclear. She blinked, the noise of the store and the faint voices of customers becoming louder in her ears. But as her eyes focused on the man kneeling beside her, everything else seemed to blur into the background. Johnny Depp's face was the first thing her mind could latch onto, and with it came a flood of memories. Though fragmented, they hit her with a force she hadn't expected. At first it was just flashes, moments of her younger self sitting on the couch at home, eyes glued to the television, watching Johnny's films. She remembered the first time she had seen him on screen, how he had captivated her, not just with his acting, but with the way he seemed to embody the very essence of freedom. In those moments of watching him, Lily allowed herself to dream, dreams of escaping her difficult life, of one day being part of something bigger, just like him. Her memories flickered between moments of watching interviews, hearing him speak about his struggles, his humanity, his rise from humble beginnings. She had often thought to herself that Johnny was different from other celebrities. He was relatable in a way that no one else was. But it wasn't just the films that kept her hooked, it was the hope he unknowingly gave her. Johnny was the kind of man who had overcome hardships, much like Lily had dreamed of doing. It was this hope that had driven her to pursue her own dreams of working in the entertainment industry, even though life often seemed to pull her in different directions. The flashes continued, each one showing the difficult years that followed. She remembered the broken home she had come from, the constant battles between her parents, the financial struggles. She had often felt like she was drowning in it all, like her dreams were out of reach. But Johnny's face had always been there, silently pushing her to keep going. Then, in the haze of these memories, something shifted. A new memory surfaced, one that Lily had completely forgotten about until now. It was from a particularly dark time in her life, her mother's serious car accident that had left her in critical condition. The family was struggling, barely able to cover medical expenses. It was a time when hope seemed impossible to hold on to. But then, a mysterious donation had come through, enough to cover the hospital bills, to save her mother's life. At the time, no one had known where the money came from. The family had assumed it was a wealthy relative or an anonymous charity. But now, as Lily's mind began to piece things together, the truth hit her with the weight of a ton of bricks. Johnny Depp. He had been the one to help them. He had anonymously paid for her mother's medical bills, ensuring she would survive. Lily had never known, had never even suspected, that the man she had admired from afar for so long, had been the one to help her family during their most desperate time. The realization crashed over her in waves, each one deeper and more overwhelming than the last. Johnny hadn't just been some distant figure in her life, he had been a silent guardian, a benefactor who had unknowingly guided her through the darkest chapters. She had dreamed of meeting him, but she never imagined this would be how it would happen. Tears welled up in Lily's eyes, as she finally understood the full extent of what had just unfolded. She looked up at Johnny, the weight of the years of unanswered questions suddenly lifting. Johnny, sensing her emotional turmoil, reached out to gently touch her hand, offering a sense of quiet reassurance that in that moment felt like the most profound connection she had ever experienced. As the commotion around Lily began to settle, so did the surreal feeling in the air. The store manager had already called for medical assistance, and the crowd that had gathered around Lily started to disperse. The chaos of the moment was beginning to fade, but Johnny Depp remained kneeling beside her, his face calm and unreadable, yet there was a warmth in his eyes. After a moment of quiet reflection, Johnny gently stood up. His expression was one of quiet concern, but there was no rush in his movements. He looked down at Lily, who was still dazed, and softly asked, "Are you okay?" Lily, still struggling to fully grasp what had just happened, nodded slowly. Her body still felt weak, but her mind was starting to clear. Johnny smiled at her with a tenderness that made her heart skip a beat. "Take care of yourself," he said, his voice calm and reassuring. "And don't forget, you're stronger than you know." Those words, so simple yet profound, seemed to resonate deep within Lily. She had always been strong in her own way, but hearing them from him, someone she had admired for years, made her realize just how much strength she truly had. The quiet power of his words stayed with her, lingering in her mind long after he spoke them. Without another word, Johnny turned and walked away, his departure as quiet and graceful as his entrance had been. There were no grand gestures, no fanfare. He didn't seek attention, even as the store buzzed with whispers of his unexpected appearance. It was as if he had never been there at all, except for the lasting impact he had left behind. Lily sat there for a moment, her eyes following Johnny's retreating figure. Her heart felt heavy, a strange mix of gratitude and awe. She had never imagined that a moment like this could be part of her life's story. A few seconds ago, she had felt lost, overwhelmed by the weight of her struggles. But now, after that brief, unexpected encounter, she felt something new, a quiet sense of strength rising within her. As the supermarket returned to its usual rhythm, with customers going back to their shopping and employees resuming their duties, Lily realized that she would never forget this day. She would never forget Johnny's unexpected kindness. In the chaos of life, some moments stand out, moments that change the course of things in ways no one could predict. And as she sat there, slowly recovering from her fainting spell, Lily understood something profound. Sometimes, even the briefest of encounters could alter the entire trajectory of a life. Johnny Depp, a celebrity she had once only seen on screen, had unknowingly given her the gift of strength and hope when she needed it most. Life slowly returned to normal for Lily. She was back at work a few days later, still feeling the lingering effects of that surreal encounter. Her body had recovered from the fainting spell, but the emotional shift was far more profound. She felt stronger now, not just physically, but emotionally. The exhaustion she had carried for so long seemed lighter, and the weight of her struggles felt a little easier to bear. As she worked through her shifts, she often found herself smiling at random moments, remembering the unexpected kindness of Johnny Depp. The way he had appeared out of nowhere, so calm and composed, had left a lasting mark on her. She couldn't quite explain why it had impacted her so deeply, but she realized that sometimes the most unlikely people show up when you least expect it, and in doing so change your life forever. Johnny's words, simple yet powerful, echoed in her mind. "You're stronger than you know." They had given her a renewed sense of purpose, a reminder that even in her darkest moments, she had the strength to keep going. As she worked, her heart felt lighter, knowing that the universe had sent her a small miracle when she needed it most. Thank you so much for watching this incredible and emotional story. It's a reminder that sometimes life can surprise us in the most unexpected ways, and even the briefest encounters can have a lasting impact. We hope you felt the connection and strength that Lily experienced, and that it leaves you with a renewed sense of hope. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button, leave a comment to share your thoughts, and subscribe for more heartfelt and inspiring tales. And if you think this story could touch someone else, make sure to share it with your friends and family. Your support means the world, and we're so grateful to have you with us. Stay tuned for more stories that will warm your heart and leave you thinking long after they're over.